Welcome to this ACCA paper P3 video, which goes through some of the general basic do's and don'ts as far as studying for the exam is concerned. All of these are based on mistakes that past students have made so that you don't repeat them. Right. First of all, do be aware of the context of each question. So, the examples that I've got, what industry is the company in? If the company is an accountancy college, or if the company is a manufacturer of cars, or if the company is actually not a company at all, it's a non-profit making organisation like a charity, that will change your answers. Many students would write exactly the same answer for all three of those situations. How is the company performing? Things that are sensible if an organisation is doing well are not necessarily sensible if a company is doing poorly. So, for example, if a company is doing well, it probably has plenty of cash in the bank which it can spend to expand. If a company is doing poorly, it may have very little cash in the bank. So if you recommend spend lots of money, they haven't got any. So is the company performing well or badly? What difference will these make to your answer? Well, I hope I've already given you some examples, but as I say, many students completely ignore what's going on. And so they end up with answers that don't really solve the problems that the company is facing. Do understand how to apply your knowledge. Lots of students at P3 think that all they have to do is to just write down everything that they have learnt about theory. You would be surprised at how many students think it is perfectly acceptable to repeat page 27 of their textbook or page 97 of their lecture notes, completely ignoring the company that the question is about, completely ignoring what they have been asked to do, but simply saying, look, I have learned all these things. That will not help. So, do understand how to apply the knowledge. Don't just learn it, but learn when to use it. So, you've learned a model. When do you use that model? How do you use that model? How do you interpret the answers that you have got from using that model? You will almost certainly have numbers somewhere in your exam. Maybe in the compulsory question, maybe in the optional questions, but they will be there somewhere. What do the numbers tell you? You might be surprised, I would even go so far as to say shocked, at how poor most students' financial analysis actually is. Most students' financial analysis literally is the number has gone up. The number has gone down. If you were a qualified accountant going to a client and you said to the client, this number has gone up, this number has gone down, here is my invoice, I don't think they would be in any mood to pay that invoice. So we need to think about what the numbers mean. So basic financial analysis to understand how a company is performing. Revenue is up, profits are up, receivables are up, liquidity is down. What does that sound as though is happening? It sounds like they're giving lots of credit to their debtors, which means although they're getting lots of revenue and although they're getting lots of profit, they haven't actually got any cash. That may cause them a problem. You have got a company and you look at the company and you see that their inventory is increasing very, very rapidly. Is that a bad thing? Well, it could be if they've got more things in stock than they need, or it could be a deliberate policy because they are perhaps about to launch a new advertising marketing campaign, so they're deliberately putting things in their warehouse. Without knowing the context of the question, I can't tell you. Lots of students will simply say inventory is going up, that is a bad thing because too much money is being held in stock, without thinking about whether it's deliberate or not. So what do the numbers mean for the company that we are looking at. Now, I've got their basic financial analysis. It's not complex financial analysis. It doesn't talk about anything to do with international accounting standards or anything like that. It's just the basic kind of ratios that you have done in all of your financial accounting papers. The trick is to make sure you say what the numbers actually mean. Do practice exam questions. There is no substitute at all for actually practicing them. Now, there's two bits that you have to be good at. One of them is understanding the requirement, understanding what the examiner is actually requiring you to do. But just as important, in fact, I would almost argue more important, is understanding what the examiner is telling you in the narrative of the question. Now, the narrative of the question is simply everything that the examiner tells you about the company. You need to be able to say, you told me that, it's important because. You told me this, it's important because. You told me that, it's important because. And the only way to do this is to practice questions. And when I say practice, I do mean practice. I do not mean reading the question and then reading the answer straight away, which is what lots of students do, unfortunately. The only way to make sure you understand what the examiner is telling you is to do it, to do the questions properly. That way you can make sure you did understand what the examiner meant, and you can practice things like coming up with your own suggestions. If all you do is you read what the examiner is suggesting, that really is not helping you at all. So lots of exam questions, even better, under exam conditions. That would be brilliant. So practice your exam questions. Don't try and show how much you have learned about a syllabus area. I've sort of mentioned this already. There is a limit to how many theory marks there are on the exam. On a typical P3 exam, I would say less than 10%. Less than 10 marks are there for actually talking about theory. Often there's a lot less than that. I think the most I've ever seen is 10. So if all you do is write out lots and lots of theory, you're not getting anything. You're not getting any marks. Notice what it says here, the key discriminator, the bit that's going to have some people pass and some people fail. Some people who pass know which bits of theory to use for a particular question, for a particular situation. They use those bits of theory and they ignore everything else. Poor quality students will use the theory and then they'll use some more theories and then they'll talk about some more theories. Often they're saying the same thing over and over again, and often they're talking about stuff that's irrelevant. So again, you must understand what the theories mean as much as just knowing what the theories actually are. Don't expect to pass the paper without being able to give practical solutions. You've got to be able to give advice to a client. The way that I would explain things to my students, the way I explain things on the videos, is imagine this is a client. If the client likes your advice, you get paid. Or in other words, you pass the exam. If the client does not like your advice, you fail. You don't get paid. So you've got to give advice which is practical for that company. The advice that you give to a multinational is different to the advice you give to a small company which only employs 4 people. And so, again, one of the big discriminators that sets out those that pass from those that fail, those that pass know what is going to be appropriate for the company they're talking about, the situation they're talking about. It does not say to give the correct solution. Notice that is not what that says. It says give a practical solution. There are lots of potential solutions to problems. You simply have to say why your one is practical. But you won't pass the exam unless you can do this. Obviously, it's one of the key skills of being an accountant. Don't simply learn answers to previous exam questions. I see this over and over and over again. A student has learnt an answer to a question and then they repeat it when we've now got a completely different situation, usually because the topic is the same. So, for example, a question might ask 1 year about what's going on in the outside world that affects a large multinational company, and a student reads the question and learns the answer. And then in the exam, they get asked the question, what might affect a small charity? And they write exactly the same answer as the one that they've just learnt, which of course is completely irrelevant to a small charity because it's nothing like a large multinational organisation. So don't just learn bits. Again, you need to understand, why was that a sensible solution to that particular situation in the earlier exam question? Why was it sensible? When would it still be sensible? When would it not be sensible? So again, you need to build up a bank of different solutions and think about when they would work. And they won't all work for the same kind of situation. Finally, don't give up. There will be times when you are studying this paper. It is a written paper, so there are going to be large chunks of your time which are spent listening to videos or reading parts of the study text or perhaps writing out practice answers. And for some reason, it never feels like you're getting as far as you do when you're doing a numerical subject. When you're doing numbers, for some reason, it always makes you feel as though you're actually achieving something. If you get a particular part of a calculation right, then you always feel you've achieved something. The wordy papers can feel like they are hard going. Don't give up with P3. It's one of the most fundamental papers, really, to your future success as being an accountant. For all the technical skills that you have, why would most companies want you to be a senior person in their company? Why might they employ you at all? But certainly, why do they want you to be senior? Because you can solve problems. You're a problem solver. I can analyse the problem. I can come up with some sensible solutions. That's what P3 is. So it's like real life. So don't give up on it. There will be times when it seems quite hard, but P3 is a doable paper. And by doable, I mean it is not that difficult to pass as long as you follow the advice that we give you in all of the videos. So that's a brief do's and don'ts for paper P3. I wish you all the best.